Hello everyone, how are you? This is Valencia Flyer coming out. Hope you guys are doing wonderfully. I am back. I've been away for a little bit. I took a little bit of a break. I had to be honest with you. It's been ongoing since I finished training. It's been nonstop as far as flights. And to be honest with you, I had to take a little bit of a break. So excuse my absence, but I am back full force, ready to get some more videos out to you. And today we are going to be talking about something that I have been planning to talk to you about for a very long time, and something that I definitely have promised to get to you. And we're gonna start talking today about schedules. I've thought this through, and I think what I'm going to do with this is kind of turn it into a two-part series. What we're going to do is we're going to examine what my 2023 looked like, what the work was for September, October, November, and December of 2023. Look at the schedule, see how many hours were invested, talk a little bit about what had to happen in order for that to be successful, especially being a commuter in Detroit and also in Seattle. And then we're also going to in the part two, we're going to take that schedule and look at the money aspect and see how that all translates into money. So we're going to get a nice overview of the last third of 2023 in some pretty good detail that I'm going to be able to share with you here today, okay? So if you are looking to get into becoming a flight attendant, if you're going to be going into training, or you're going to submit your application and do your face-to-face, then this might be some very, very important information for you, especially if you've never been in the aviation industry before. I know that for me, before I became a flight attendant, this kind of video would be something I would really pay really close attention to, because I wanted to see what I was getting myself into, okay? See what the payout was, see what the time commitment was going to be. So we're gonna try to go over all of this for those people. And so hopefully this is gonna be really, really good information for you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. A little bit of background. I started my training for my airline on July 10th. I graduated on August 18th. Now, at that point, I had been assigned, at that point, there were only 3 bases that I can pick from. One was Boston, another one was Detroit, and lastly, there was Minneapolis, if I remember correctly, okay? You've seen some of my other videos. If not, here's a link for one of those other ones where I had to pick my base and figure out what was going on. But ultimately, I picked Detroit because there seemed to be more interesting flights coming out of there. It just seemed a little bit more active, if you know what I'm saying. So it was a good choice because I really enjoyed being in Detroit. I was only there a couple months before I finally got my transfer over to Seattle. And I've now been in Seattle. I think I'm now starting my 3rd or 4th month in Seattle right now. I live just outside of Portland, Oregon. So it's gonna be a lot easier. Well, I wouldn't say easier, but closer for me to commute from the Portland area to Seattle than it would be all the way to Detroit. But we're gonna talk a little bit more about all that. So that is basically the background. Now, once we graduated on the 18th of August, there was probably about, according to this, about 2 full weeks that I didn't have any work. Now, because we're graduated in the middle of August, schedules had already come out for August. There was nothing going to be given to me for August. My schedule wasn't going to start becoming active until September. Why? Because in the aviation industry, we typically get 1 full month of schedule at a time. So we'll get all of September at a time, then we'll get all of October at a time, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, I had to wait until I was going to be assigned my schedule for September. But that being said, I went ahead and picked up my very first trip in August, and that was, it looks like it was August 26th. And if you remember, and again, here's the link on the video on there, the first trip was Milwaukee, and that was my very first trip. when it comes to this video, we're not going to include that trip. We're going to look at months as a whole, okay? So we're going to start with September, and specifically here, we're going to be starting with September 1st and 2nd. Now, let's go ahead and look at the end of August right here. If you look on August 31st, it looks like I got scheduled from my airline what we call A days, which to you might be translated into like on-call days, right? So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 A days that were scheduled to me, on-call days. The 30th, 31st, 1, 2, 3, and 4 of September. On the 2nd, I was called into action. The 30th, 31st, and the 1st, I was not called. I kind of probably just kicked back. I was in my hotel room, my crash pad, whatever, and just waiting for someone to call me into action. Finally, on the 2nd, they did. And that I'm going to consider the very first trip of September, okay? So September was started out, and let's look at what our schedule looked like in September. So we had a 3-day trip on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Then we had a few days off, 5, 6, and 7. We had another trip, 8, 9, and 10, okay? And it looks like you'll see that there was also an A day there. So that means that I originally had A days on the 8, 9, and 10. I was called into action on the 8th, the very first of my A days, and they gave me a trip, okay? So that's what that's all about. Then there was a day of rest on the 11th, 12, 13, and 14, I had a 3-day trip. 2 days of rest, 15, 16, and on the 17th and 18th, it looks like I had a 2-day trip. And then on the 19th, I had about a 1-day, probably about a 1-day turn there, okay? Then on the 20th, we had, as new hires, we are typically on probation for X amount of time. For my airline, we are on probation for 6 months. Every month for the first 6 months, we have to do a new hire meeting, which means that we have to meet with our local managers at base, see if there's any questions that we have, see if there's any, there's a little presentation to get us a little bit more accustomed to the system, on how things work, that sort of a thing. So it's a little bit of hand-holding for the first 6 months when it comes to that, which is totally fine by me, because let me tell you, during those meetings, there's a lot of information to go over, a lot of information to absorb. And to be honest, all this information they're giving you once you're on the line was not given to you during training. Training is mostly all about information about like emergency procedures and things, what to do when things might go wrong, right? But once you're on the line, it's a whole new education. And I remember the first time I was on my first flight to Milwaukee, I was like, okay, what do I do now? So it's a completely different education. So those meetings are something that are put there to help you along the process, okay? So on the 20th, it looks like I had my first meeting of 6, right? All right, so then we also had on the 22nd, it looks like I was on call the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. So that was my second set of A days. And it looks like I was on standby on the 22nd. So what does standby mean? Active standby basically means that we're going to be going in full uniform to the airport and waiting there for approximately about 4 hours so that we're there ready to go at a moment's notice in case they need us. If something happens, let me give you an example. Maybe there's a flight, that one of the flight attendants forgot their passport and they're going international, or they forgot their badge and they can't fly. They forgot the things that they need in order to be going on their trip. So in that case, they are taken off the trip, and you waiting in standby at the lounge or grabbing a drink at the food court or whatever there at the airport, they're gonna call you and say, hey, look, we need you to run over to this gate because you need a cover for this person who is not able to go. And that's what standby is basically in place for, so that flights don't get delayed or don't get canceled because they don't have enough personnel to take off, sort of a thing, okay? So that's what that was about. So it looks like on the 22nd, I was not used, so that means I sat in the airport for 4 hours. I did get paid for that time, but I was not used. So at the end of those 4 hours, I was released after those 4 hours and my day was done. Then on the 23rd, I had my second day of that set of A days, and it looks like I was called into action on that one for a 2-day on the 23rd. So that's what that's about. Then the 25th, 26th, 27 days off. 28, 29, we had a 2-day. On the 30th, we also had a 2-day as well. And then we were off, and then that was it. So that ended my September month on March 1st because the trip on the 30th spilled over into March 1st. And that is basically what we had. So if we total up September, we worked a total of 105 hours for that month of September. Okay, now let's go ahead and move over to October. October is a very interesting month because I remember October being based in Detroit, and Detroit being 3 hours ahead of time, East Coast time compared to West Coast time where I'm from in Portland. Sometimes it didn't make a lot of sense for me to fly back because of the time difference, because of the availability of flights, and I had to be back the next day or shortly thereafter for the next trip. So I remember October very, very clearly because I was only home twice the whole month of October because I was working that much. And one of those times was because it was a layover on one of my trips. So October was very intense for me, only being my second month on the line. So, all right, let's go over the schedule for October. So October, it looks like we started, remember that spillover from September, that was on the 1st. So 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, I had off. Then on the 5th, 6th, and 7th, I had a 3-day trip. Then right back to back on the 8th, 9th, and 10th, I had another 3-day trip. And then on the 11th, I had the day off. But then, as you can see, I also had another 2-day trip on the 12th and 13th. So most likely on that 11th, I did not come home. I just stayed in Detroit because it wasn't worth it to come home only for a few hours to only have to be back early the next morning on the 12th. So the 12th, 13th was a 2-day. Then on the 14th, we had a 3-day, 14, 15, 16. A day off on the 17th. Again, the same situation. I probably stayed in Detroit on that one. It wasn't worth coming home. Then on the 18th and 19th, I had a 2-day. Then right back to back on the 20th, I had another 3-day, 20, 21, and 22. A day off on the 23rd. And then I was on standby on the 24th. So that was my first set of A days, it looks like. And I was released on that. And they actually released my whole entire 3 days of on-call days. So I was lucky because at that point I was like, whew, okay, I need a break. I went home, I'm sure, relaxed for a few days, and that was good. But then I probably picked up a trip on the 27th, 28th, and 29th, which was another 3-day. And on the 31st of October, it looks like I had my second meeting for my new hire meeting. It looks like I had that on the 31st of October. And that's how we ended the month. So October ended with 120 hours of work. So a little bit more, 15 hours more than September. And that's how it ended for October. All right, let's go right into November. And November, we started the first day with another meeting, believe it or not. So my next meeting, my third meeting, the third out of 6, was on November 1st, which meant that I had to, still be there in base in Detroit to take this meeting. And then I had the 2nd, 3rd off. Then it looks like on the 4th, 5th, and 6th, I had my first set of A days for November. And it looks like I was released on that one. I wasn't really used for those. I got paid, but I wasn't used. Then on the 7th and 8th, I had a 2-day. 9 and 10, I was off. And 11, 12, 13, I had a 3-day that looks like, or it might have been a 2-day that released early in the morning on the 13th. Then I was able to go home for a little while, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I was not in base, I'm sure. But then on the 19th, 20, and 21st, I had another 3-day. On the 22nd, 23rd, I'm off. Then I picked up a 2-day. Now this one's interesting because the 24th and 25th, I picked up a 2-day. This looks like it was the very first time that I picked up out of base. What does that mean? So I'm based in Seattle, or rather in this situation, I was based in Detroit, but I lived right outside of Portland. We're able to pick up trips outside of base as long as it's available, as long as we're legal to do that. And in this particular case, I was. So I picked up a 2-day from Portland that originated from Portland that flew to New York, stayed there for X amount of hours, and then flew back to Portland, which for me was really nice because on that one, I wasn't really a commuter because I live right outside of Portland. So I was able to drive 20 minutes to the airport from my house, do the trip, land, 20 minutes back home. Beautiful. I love it. So I've actually done this trip several times. It is one of my favorite easy trips to do. I love going to New York. There's so many cool things to do in New York. So that is definitely one that I'll keep looking after to pick up out of base. Even though I was in Detroit at this time, and now being in Seattle, I still pick up this New York one every once in a while, which is still an out of base pickup. Okay, so the 24th and 25th was New York. Then we had a 26, 27, and 28, which this one was probably out of Detroit, which means I had to fly over on the 25th to Detroit to start my trip on the 26th. 1 day of rest on the 29th, and then I had a 3-day on the 30th, and which spilled over into December, which was the 1st and the 2nd. So that 3-day was November 30th, December 1st, and December 2nd. And that's how the month of November ended. So in the month of November, we actually worked less hours, and that was a total of 94 hours for November. All right, moving on. Let's get to December. December, as you know, of course, it's probably one of the busiest months, one of the busiest for travel, and in this case, it most definitely was. So let's go ahead and get started on December. December looks like the 1st and 2nd was that spillover from November. Then on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I had off. Then my first trip for December was 6, 7, and 8. That was a 3-day. Then on the 9th, we had 9, 10, and 11. Now, let me say this real quick. Actually, if I remember correctly, in December, it might have been where I was already transferred over to Seattle. So if I'm not mistaken, December I was based in Seattle, no longer based in Detroit. So that is a little bit of a difference. So it probably eased my travel a little bit from commuting to work sort of a thing. So let's keep that in mind. So, okay, so the 9th, 10th, and the 11th, I had a 3-day, then a day of rest on the 12th, and the 13th, I had my new hire meeting, which is the 3rd, maybe the 4th, if I remember. So that is, yeah, that's the 4th meeting, okay? 4th out of 6. Then a rest on the 14th, 15th. Then on the 16th, I had A days, it looks like. So 16, 17, and 18, and I was released on those. Then picked up a trip because I was let go of that responsibility of having those 3 A days. They were wiped from my schedule, but then I picked up a trip in replace of it, and that was going on a 2-day. 1 day of rest on the 18th. Then on the 19th, 20, 21st, I had a 3-day. 22nd, we rested. The 23rd, there's that trip again from Portland. We went and picked up out of base. On the 23rd, went to New York. That was a 2-day. Then 1 day of rest on the 25th. Then on the 26th, I was able to go to Hawaii for the first time. All right, or like the locals say, Hawaii. All right, so 26 and 27, I was able to go to Hawaii to a place called Lahui, gorgeous. If you've never been, I so recommend going there. It is the furthest island away from the mainland, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And the place we stay in was just chef's kiss. Amazing, amazing. All right, so that was the 26th, 27th. Then on 28th, we rested. 29, 30, and 31st, we had another 3-day, which ends our December. And there you have it, folks. All right, so in December, we did 120 hours. Woo! All right, so to recap, September, 105 hours. October, 120 hours. November, 94 hours. And December, another 120 hours. And there you have it. All right, so on the next episode, we're gonna dive a little deeper into these hours, into the schedule, and look at what the earning potential was for myself for these 4 months, okay? All of 2023, we're gonna go over that, all right? So that is pretty much what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. If you guys have any questions, any comments, please let me know below. I always love reading them. Let me know what you guys might be thinking. If you're thinking about getting into this aviation industry, which by the way is really cool, and I'm digging it so far, I gotta tell you. Please let me know if you have any questions below, all right? It's wonderful to have you. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, folks. And I will be back with part 2 of this 2-part series when it comes to the schedule and earning potential of 2023. All right, guys, until then, we will talk soon. All right, thanks so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.